Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here in jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk in Edinburgh, in Scotland, United Kingdom, capital of the universe, and everything in it. I hope everybody has had a good week. I have had a busy one. I know I keep saying that every week, but recently every week has been absolutely mental. So I've been totally wiped out this whole weekend. I've spent most of the weekend flat on my back in my bed, to be honest. That's how completely done this week has made me. So I'm, as soon as I'm done with this show, I am going right back there. Because I know the coming week is going to be very busy as well, with lots of different things going on, work, and a few other projects that I'm involved in that I can't talk about. But there is much going on at the moment. So we've got quite a few people here already. I wasn't sure how many people we would have, but we do have quite a few. So. And I have completely forgotten to start up Studio One, which is not clever because we might be using it at some point this evening. So I had better start that up. But I hope everybody is okay. And I think my good friend Alan over in Glasgow was the first one to pop in. Normally we have people pop in way ahead of time. But about 10 minutes or so before showtime, Alan popped in and he had a question, actually, which I'm going to address to start off. Excuse me, to start off with. And I'll get to that in just a minute because his question's actually pretty good. But I wanted to go through and kind of see who's here other than Alan. We have John Lake, Dwayne, Thomas over in the Philippines. Andre Oliveira is here. And who else do we have? Tony Stringer is here. Bobby Booth, no show is complete without him. And Andy Arthur, I've not seen Andy in a long time. Andy, welcome. I'm glad you're here, buddy. Thanks for coming. And it's not often that you get to come to my shows, so I really appreciate you being here. Andy is a great guy. He has a studio. He has a massive studio, if memory serves, from pictures of your studio, Andy, that you have this giant studio. And he also, I think as part of what he does, he sells a whole bunch of Personas gear as well. So he's a pretty great guy to get to know. Really knows his stuff as well. So who else do we have? We have Cleon. We have Bill Shepherd as well, who has just walked in. And some of you are watching the SpaceX launch. I would love to be watching the SpaceX launch, to be honest, because I am a bit of a NASA fan. I became a NASA fan pretty much with the first of the shuttle launches, actually. And kind of as a result of that, I decided to go back and take a good long look at the lunar missions, all of the Mercury missions, and then all of the Apollo missions leading up to Apollo 11 and the first lunar landing with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, and then subsequent missions to the moon, including Apollo 13. I have the entire air-to-ground transcript of Apollo 13, which you can get from NASA. Actually, you can get it direct from the NASA website. It's very, very cool. Very easy to get hold of. And if you're into that kind of thing, there is quite a lot of technical stuff to read through. But you do actually get to see, you get to read all of the dialogue between the command module and Houston when the accident happened on Apollo 13. And if you compare the transcript to the movie Apollo 13, the actual dramatization of the accident in the movie Apollo 13 is actually pretty faithful to the transcript of how events transpired as you read through the transcript. So they obviously studied, the scriptwriters obviously studied that transcript. So I have all of that, and I'm very much into that, and I would love to be watching this launch because it's pretty important. It's a pretty important test of the SpaceX craft and all of that as they prepare to return to the moon in 2024. So that's really exciting. I'm really excited about this particular mission. So there you go. There's something else you know about me that you didn't know before. You probably never knew that I was into all of that NASA stuff. But yes, I am very much. So yeah, it's very, very cool. But let's go and check out Alan's question, which was posted 14 minutes before showtime. And he said, "Hi Jonny, I hope you and your family are well. I got a MIDI pack with chord progressions. How would I put together a song with it? I don't know music theory." Okay, you may or may not be referring to the much advertised on YouTube Unison chord pack. If that's what you're referring to, then I don't know very much about it, to be honest, other than the adverts that I have seen on YouTube, and that's possibly what kind of got you into getting the chord pack. Cool thing about this chord pack is that, from what I understand, it has preset chord changes in just about every major and minor key. So all 12 major and all 12 minor keys in a variety of different styles of music. Now here's the thing. The best way to approach such things, if you have no knowledge of music theory whatsoever, is to be guided by your ear and compare what you are hearing and what you like from the chord pack with other pieces of music that are kind of commercially viable products in the same style that you're wanting to write your song in. And by doing those two things, so having a reference track and using your ear to decide upon what you like from the chord pack, then you can come up with a piece of music. Now, not knowing music theory should not be a stumbling block to you being creative, because you can use your ears. You can decide what works and what doesn't by your ear, and also comparing it to established written pieces of music that follow accepted what we would loosely refer to as accepted 18th, 19th century European Western music, which is by and largely what popular music is written in. It follows those accepted customs, those accepted principles that were developed in Western Europe in the 18th century, 19th century. So, yeah. So kind of be guided by those two principles and you won't go too far wrong. And you'll find some chords that work. And once you've found a set of chord changes that work for your song, the next challenge is making melody that fits those chords. And so if you are coming from no music theory background, finding melody notes that fit, again, is going to be dictated by your ears, what you kind of like the sound of. And it may well be that you have an ear that prefers dissonance than consonance. I know a lot of people that are like that. They prefer notes that don't necessarily belong in the theoretical sense to the chord, but they provide tension. So they would maybe write a piece of melody that is quite in tension with the chords. Now, sometimes that can work. And sometimes it doesn't work at all, and it just sounds grating because there is too much tension and not enough release. So that's the thing that you have to balance with any piece of music, whether you have a good grounding of music theory or not, is you need to balance tension with release. If you have tension, you need to release it somewhere. Now, obviously, as the years and the centuries have gone by, we have allowed and accepted more tension in our music than less. So, what would be regarded in the Baroque period, in the 17th century. So we're talking like the 1600s. So we're talking Bach and Handel, early Handel, and people like that. There are intervals and chords that were acceptable to the ear, and there are levels of tension that, if you were to grade music by a kind of spice category, then Baroque music is not particularly spicy. It has some spicy moments, but they are very few and far between. Classical music with Mozart, later Handel, and early Beethoven has a little bit more spice, a little bit more tension, a little bit more dissonance, a little bit more chromaticism. So the spice level goes up a little bit. And then you get into the Romantic period, which is where late Beethoven, and then you get into people like Tchaikovsky and Mendelssohn and Brahms and people like that. And the spice level goes up a little bit more. And there is more tension, there is more dissonance, there are more notes in the chords. And then you get into the early 20th century period when you get into people like Ravel, Debussy, and the impressionist kind of school of thought and music, where things were hinted at. And then you get a lot more tension. And then, of course, you get into people like Scriabin and Schoenberg and Webern and people like that, who developed very, very, very spicy music that had a lot of atonality, a lot of chromaticism, a very, very high tension quotient, if you like, to their music. There's a large percentage of tension and a lot less release. And so that was kind of the point of that kind of period. And then, of course, you get into kind of electronic music and experimental and improvisational music in the the 1930s, 1940s period. I'm still talking about kind of what we would call classical music. And then kind of alongside that, you have how popular music has developed from music halls and vaudeville in the 1910s and 1920s into swing music and bigger bands, larger ensembles. And then in the 1940s with bebop, the ensembles got smaller again and the music got a lot more spicy. And then you get into kind of the 1950s and kind of school where kind of a lot of the tension was taken out and everything became a lot more chill. And then John Coltrane came on the scene and everything became a lot more spicy again. And then you get kind of the music of Pharoah Sanders where the spice level is off the scale. And then you get fusion music where rock and jazz kind of came together and hadn't had this powerful, passionate affair. And that's where you get the music of kind of Weather Reports, John McLaughlin, Chick Corea, Miles Davis, kind of later period Miles Davis, being influenced by Jimi Hendrix being influenced by Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and kind of like the cross-pollination between jazz and rock wasn't just jazz coming down to rock's level or rock coming up to jazz's level. It was constant. It was two-way traffic. You have rock musicians being influenced by John Coltrane and Miles Davis, and you have Miles Davis and John Coltrane being influenced by rock music. So, and the spice level increases. So, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say here that you have to balance tension and release in order for music to work and to be appreciated by a wider audience, and not just a small little clique of musicians who dig your music and understand your technical approach to music. You kind of want to avoid that if you can, where you appeal to a small little cult of just musicians who understand what you do, and have a broader base of listeners that appreciate what you do. So you have to be able to balance tension and release. And how much you do that will depend upon kind of who you are aiming your music at. If you're aiming your music at yourself, and you're just making music because it is your self-expression, and that is kind of where it ends, and if people dig it, then that's a bonus, then you can have as much tension in your music as you want. But if you're aiming for a broader audience and a larger listener base, then yes, you probably want to bounce off that tension and release. Music is a language, so music has syntax, it has grammar, it has punctuation, it has things that make it make sense. And, the way we learn language, particularly when we are infants, when we are tiny, when we're like, 18 months old, how do we learn to speak? We learn to speak from hearing our parents speak and hearing the television speak or the radio speak. That's how we learn. And we learn to make those sounds. We learn to put those words together and to form sentences out of those words that people can understand, that our parents can understand. And we start with a few words, and we just gradually add and add and add and add until we have, hopefully, a broad vocabulary of words and sentences and things that we can talk about on a much grander level. And so it is with music. You may have no understanding right now of music theory, and I am largely self-taught. Yes, I went to university and I studied composition and arranging. That's kind of what I did. I did a joint honors degree. It was composition and it was audio engineering. So yes, I have formal training in music composition, and therefore I have formal training and formal understanding of music theory. But that really, for me personally, only reinforced what I had intuitively discovered myself from sitting down at a keyboard and listening to a lot of music and trying to work out how music worked, because that's the kind of brain that I have, for better, for worse. I have that kind of brain that is wired that way, where I listen and I try and work things out. Some people, they like to take a car engine apart, and the fun aspect for them, the discovery, is taking the engine apart and looking at each part and how it interacts with the other parts, and then they put the engine back together, they reassemble it, they put it back inside the car, and then they turn the ignition on and the car engine fires up. For them, that's their kick. Mine is deconstructing music, figuring out how it all works, and then making music as a result of that. So my university degree kind of helped ratify and formalize what I already understood from listening. So what I'm saying is, you can learn the language by immersing yourself in the language, by listening to it, absorbing it, and speaking it. I mean, that's the best way to learn language. If you want to learn French, hang out with French people. Hang out with French people, listen to them, listen to how they speak, even if you don't understand a single word, I tell you, within a short time, you will begin understanding what they're talking about, and you will begin to be able to form your own sentences and contribute to their discussion. Because that's how we learn language. We learn language in kind of hourly, internally. And so it is with music. And yes, you can formalize it, and you can codify it, but you don't have to. So with things like the Unison MIDI pack, take little elements of it and decide what you'd like, what you don't like, and try and figure out why you like certain chord changes that are there and why you dislike certain other chord changes that are there. And then, kind of figure out how you would prefer to apply those chord changes. And then you have to figure out how you're going to derive melody from those. If, in fact, your music is going to be melodic. It may not be. The way you were talking in the chat suggests to me that a lot of what you may want to do is going to be more kind of quote-unquote modern impressionist style, where melody is less central and kind of the overall sound is what you're going for, kind of hinting at the picture, which is what the Impressionist school did. It's what developed it. Ravel and Debussy did so incredibly well. If you listen to Debussy's Prelude of a Faun, for example, you listen to the music and you close your eyes, you can actually picture what he was looking at, which was a faun and a gazelle interacting together. So he then tried to capture that in music. And so the melody is not necessarily the main feature. I mean, there are some thematic elements to it, but the melody is not the main thing. The main thing is kind of the sound and capturing the motion and the movement and the atmosphere of the image. So maybe that's what you might want to go for, in which case, following accepted harmonic rules and traditions is maybe not going to be the thing that you want. You may actually want to deviate from it. But if that is your choice and you do decide to deviate from it, you need to have a reason for it. Because you need your listener to understand your communication. Otherwise, it's meaningless. So, be discerning is what I'm trying to say. So that was a very, very long answer. But I really hoped, Alan, that it helped you kind of think about, don't let not having any formal music training discourage you from being able to be creative with, preset chord changes. Because you can be really creative. You can, shift things around. You can transpose things. You can try different things out. You can try different sets of chord changes together and see whether they work or whether they don't work. You can be gloriously experimental, and that is what I would recommend to you. I hope that helps. So let's go and see what else is going on in the chat here. After that very, 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 very long answer. But I wanted to be really thorough. Especially as Bobby Booth has said right here. He says, I know nothing of music theory. Well, you know what? You don't necessarily have to. Especially if you're a mix engineer. However, I will say this. If you're a mix engineer, it helps to know at least some music theory. At least to be able to discern the difference between different moods. Between major and minor. Between tension and release. Even if you don't know how those things work. So long as you can, by ear, identify them, then they're going to help you as you're mixing the song to be able to bring out the emotion with some automation or with some reverb or with some delays or whatever to make a song really, really come to life. And for your mix to be, not just 2-dimensional, not just 3-dimensional, but 4-dimensional. And what I mean by that is that you are getting at the emotion of the listener. You are wanting to manipulate the emotion of the listener as much as the songwriter and the song itself and the performances do. You're enhancing what is already there. So, but you need to be able to recognize what is there in order to be able to enhance it to the, to a very, very deep and high level of acuity. And you can do that by just having a little bit of understanding of how music works. And, you don't have to be a master Lego builder to be able to do that. Even if you're only at Duplo level of understanding in terms of music theory, so long as you understand those basic building blocks at least a little bit, and you can do some reading, you can watch some YouTube videos to help guide you through that, it will help you as a mix engineer to get the best out of the song because you understand how the language works on a deeper than surface level. Certainly speaking for myself, being a mix engineer as well as a musician and as well as a composer means that when I'm mixing somebody else's work, I can listen out for how they've used a certain melodic phrase, or how they've taken a piece of melody and then transposed it up and then transposed it up again in sequence. Well, that's something I can automate. That's something I can put some reverb with, if necessary, and I can increase the send level of the reverb to bring out the emotion of that rising sequence. Things like that is what I'm talking about. That's where music theory really helps. I go, okay, there's this little melodic phrase. It appears again here, and it appears again here. It's the same, but it's higher in pitch. It's higher in pitch again. So the rising pitch of this repeated melodic phrase is to increase the tension and is to emphasize the importance of that phrase. Great, that's something I want to bring further forward in the mix. So, I hope that helps as well, Bobby. You don't have to have a great deal of music theory to be a great mix engineer, but having music theory will help propel you that little bit further as a mix engineer. All right. Cleon says, I wish so many people would understand this concept. I'm going to use this mandatory viewing for every artist that wants to take music seriously. Thank you very much. Andre says, tension is not only made through chords, though chords are a big part of it. Rhythm and dynamics are also very important. Yes and amen. 100%. 100%. You can build a lot of tension just with rhythm. I mean, think Holst's The Planets, the first movement. That insistent rhythm practically goes all the way through the whole piece. And it's that insistent rhythm that drills at you. And it's a march. It's meant to be a march in 5/4, but it's meant to be a march. And it's insistent. It bangs like a fist in your face. And it's meant to do that. So rhythm has a massive part to play, and dynamics has a massive part to play. Going from loud to quiet and back again. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you listen to Baroque music, it has hardly any dynamics to it at all. It's kind of at one volume level. If you go into classical music, that dynamic range gets a little bit bigger. And then Romantic period music, the dynamic range is enormous. I mean, if you listen to something like Mahler's Fifth Symphony, it goes from, speaker-blowingly loud to so quiet it's barely audible, and you're starting to think about turning up the volume knob. And then you get surprised by it going from that in an instant to super loud. And that was kind of a big thing with the Romantic period, was to kind of not just have contrast, but have massive contrasts, really big, wide contrasts, almost in an instant. And as you say, harmonically, things are much more spicy as well. So the rhythm is spicy. There's counter rhythms. There's syncopation, and you get a little bit of syncopation in Mozart. I mean, there's syncopation in Eine kleine Nacht music. If you listen to the first movement of that, you hear this, but it's that little, which is off the beat. That was unusual in that period, and Mozart was beginning to experiment with kind of offbeat rhythms like that. And little did he know that would have a profound influence upon Beethoven, who would make a lot of use of some uncomfortable rhythmic devices, which would then influence people like Stravinsky when he did his Firebird Suite. If you ever get the chance to listen to the Firebird Suite, you should. It's an extraordinary piece of music, and it epitomizes everything about the latter period of the Romantic period and the beginning of kind of what we would now call the modern period. So definitely, I definitely would recommend checking that out. Diego asks, how long until we get an ARM CPU-based Studio One version? I have no idea. No, I actually genuinely don't know the answer to that question. It's not that I can't tell you. I don't actually know when that is going to be a thing or not. We have on our website in the knowledge base, we have a compatibility statement about Big Sur. Go check that out if you're a Mac user and you are thinking about it and you're thinking about going up to Big Sur. Read that article first. My good friend and colleague Alex Tinsley wrote that, and it is a really, really good article, very, very thorough, and you should really read that first before you even think about going up to Big Sur. But yes, I don't know when ARM-based CPU and Studio One compatibility with that is going to be a thing or not. I suspect some point in the future, but I couldn't tell you when. If I knew, I couldn't answer the question either, because I wouldn't be able to tell you. But the truth is, I don't actually know. And apparently we have liftoff, which is awesome. Thanks, guys, for keeping me up to date with how that's all going. Let's see. Andrew Huang has a cool 30-minute video about music theory, which might be enough for you to understand what you're dealing with. If it interests you, just search Andrew Huang Music Theory on YouTube. Yeah, he's really good, actually. Another person I really, 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 really recommend, and not just for music theory, but for all things music. Whether it's music production, whether it's guitars, whether it's taking apart a classic song and figuring out what makes this song so great, is Rick Beato. Go and check out his channel. He is one of the best, if not the best, music educators in the business. He is really, really good. And he has a whole slew of really, really great content. He takes apart compression. There's a really great series actually on compression that he did, where he breaks down how it works, how different compressors work, and what makes different compressors sound different, and the way they compress music sound different. So definitely worth checking him out. He is thoroughly awesome. And I'm going to take a break to have a little bit of drink. Andre asks, do you master as well? If you do you feel like automation on the project page is missing? Great question. I do mastering, actually. And yes, I agree. That yes, there is no automation of volume or anything else on the project page. I'm smacking the mic a lot. Sorry about that. I'm pretty sure that eventually at some point it will get added. It's kind of probably inevitable at some point. But I think it is something that is missing, and if you agree with that, there is a feature request over on answers.presonus.com. Please go vote that up. The more votes it gets, the more likely it's going to be added at some point in the future, because that's where feature requests, that's where they get read by the development team over in Hamburg. That's what they look at. If they want their finger on the pulse to figure out what the user community is interested in seeing added to Studio One, and seeing the kind of general trend in which they would like Studio One to go, then that's the number one spot. The number two spot is places like the Studio One meetups. And there are loads of them at the moment. If you're in the UK, I am hosting one every month, the last Friday of every month, with the exception of Christmas Day. But there are other meetups taking place in most parts of the world now, and if there is not one near you, start one. That's the best thing I can recommend. If there isn't one in your country, or there isn't one in your town or your city, then start one. And you can email s1meetups@personas.com if you want to start one. And we'll get all the information you need to get one started. At the moment, they are happening online, on Zoom, and things like that. But eventually, we are hoping, because we started them as actual in-person meetups, I think the plan is kind of once all this COVID thing is a thing of the past, or certainly sufficiently under control, whereby we can do in-person meetings once more, that's where we'll go back to. I would dearly love to do that, because I would dearly love to see some of you guys who are in the UK in person. That would be great. You know, to actually sit around a table with coffee or with beer or whatever, to actually talk in person would be terrific. So for now, we have to do them on Zoom, but hopefully at some stage we will get to do them in person. And these meetups are great because we get to talk about things that we really like about Studio One and the things that we want to see improved. And, you know, I collect all of the information that you guys give me. So if you're at one of the UK meetups and you have a burning feature request that you would really, really, really like to see, then, you know, we can talk about that at the meetup, and I collect all of that information and I take that back to the development team, and I give them, you know, hey, these are the things that we talked about at the last meetup. And they gather all of this information and they look for trends, and then they start to plan and that kind of thing. And so hopefully, you never know, your feature request that you have personally made might actually get added to a future version of Studio One. I know that several of mine have now made it into Studio One. So I'm very pleased about that. Cleon asks, what do you set your dropout protection to in Studio One? It's going to be different for different people, because different people have different speeds of computer, different amounts of RAM, different chipsets, different processing speeds, you know, whether they are using turbo or not using turbo, those kind of things. So it's going to be very different. I actually, because I have a very fast and very powerful computer right now, and I have the Studio 1824, I don't actually need to use dropout protection. I have about just under 3 milliseconds of latency. My entire round trip latency is just under 3 milliseconds, and I can totally live with that. It's barely noticeable. And it's ideal. It's exactly what I need. But, you know, different setups will require a different dropout protection setting. Some of you guys, I mean, I know on my old computer, my previous one, it was kind of a little bit middle of the road kind of computer, and I needed to set my dropout protection to high on that computer, and then that gave me kind of not very much in the way of, I think it was like 9 or 10 milliseconds, just under 10 milliseconds, I think it was, of latency. And with the dropout protection, that basically took the latency down to hardly anything worth bothering about. So, yeah, it's going to be different for different people. Right now, I have mine set to low, which means it is not functioning at all. But that's a good question. Diego says, do you encourage people who can't afford to record their songs in a professional studio to be their own producer, engineer, and artist? The song itself is more important than the recording. Yeah. Now here's the thing. We are in the midst of what my good friend Graham Cochrane calls a recording revolution. And that is, we have technology available to us now that means we can have a top-of-the-range recording studio in our bedrooms, in our homes. Nowadays, as I've just mentioned, we have computers that are absurdly fast and powerful, with 64, 128 gigs of RAM if you really want it, with interfaces that will do less than 1 millisecond of round-trip latency. And I'm talking about the Quantums here via Thunderbolt. And we have studio-grade speakers available to us. PreSonus, we make some of the best speakers on the home studio market right now. And they win awards pretty much all the time. And I'm talking about the Eris series, the E5s, the E7s, and the E8s. And of course, we recently launched the XT line of those. And they are really, really great speakers. And then microphones. Really good quality microphones are really, really affordable now. This is a Rode NT1A. It sounds great. I got this for about £120. Super cheap. There are microphones made by a company here in the UK called Aston, who make a bunch of really, really, really good microphones that are really cheap. I mean, the price is low, but the quality is really, really, really high nowadays, that you can easily set up for under $1,000 a studio in your bedroom. And furthermore, you can make a hit record. It's been done. Grammy Award-winning records have been made in a home studio that have, been in the top 10 on the US billboards, in the Billboard 100. So it is entirely possible to have a studio that costs less than $1,000 to make hit records, to win awards, to have platinum records. It's entirely possible nowadays. And so the bigger studios, the studios where I trained as a mix engineer, are all beginning to kind of close because people can do this stuff for themselves now. I mean, especially now with COVID-19. With COVID-19, you can't go to the bigger studios, so you have to make music at home if you're going to keep working and if you're going to keep making and selling records. So kind of COVID-19, has created a perfect opportunity for the home studio market to just explode. And it is doing. Furthermore, it is doing. All of the big name hardware manufacturers that create products for the home studio market are all reporting massive surges in sales. And, DAWs are selling like hotcakes. Thousands upon thousands of registrations per day. So, now is the perfect time. And so, unfortunately, the studios where I did my training and I learned on SSL and Neve consoles and all of that, they're all going under. And it's sad because, the great records were made in these studios. And totally, you can learn how to do it yourself. There's a slew of online training from, myself, from Jonny Guy, from Dave Vignola, from Joe Gilder, from Gregor Baerle, and a whole slew of others. My other really great friend, Warren Hewitt, has produced Like a Pro, which is a fantastic thing. If you're not a member of that, you should go and become a member of it because it's really, really great. And Warren is a great guy. He has an SSL console in his home studio. And, he has been involved in some of Aerosmith's biggest hit records. As a producer, as a recording engineer, and as a mix engineer as well. He's fantastic. But I mean, he's putting out a slew of great content that you can learn from, and you can get into making music really easily nowadays. But that's a really good question. So yes, the answer is I absolutely encourage people to get Studio One, get an interface, get some speakers, get some headphones, plug everything into your computer and go and make music. And learn how to produce, learn how to mix, learn how to record, learn how to mix, learn how to master, imbibe all of this content that's available to you now so that you have no excuse but to make the best music you have ever made in your life. That would be my position. Cleon says, hopefully when I get the new AMD 5900 and 64 gigs of RAM, that should help. Yeah, 64 gigs of RAM should be more than enough. I have 16, and I can do an absolute megaton of work with just 16. Okay, cool. Now Slate has the VSX headphones, and Plugin Alliance just released a plugin for monitoring in headphones as well. Yeah, they certainly did. I hear good things about that as well. I'm a subscriber to Plugin Alliance, so I'm sure I will have to go and get that, at least to check it out. I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but does the IO Station 24C use the same converters as the Quantum interfaces? It uses the same converters as the Studio series of interfaces. So that includes the 24C, the 68, the 1824, the 1810, they all use exactly the same converters. They use the same Xmax preamps. I mean, essentially, the IO24 is a fader port and a Studio 24 kind of put together. It's as if a fader port and a Studio 24 got together and had a romantic night listening to Barry White, and the IO Station was the love child that was created in that monumental moment. So I hope that answers that question. Lowenz is here. Hello, mate. Good to see you. He says, what do you think that monthly session musician subscription? I'm not quite sure to what you're referring. But yes, I do actually earn some money as a session musician. And there are organizations where they will hire a certain number of session musicians and they will pay them a monthly salary to work for them, and a lot of the work comes through online. I am not a member of that. I certainly have thought about it, but I've also thought about how much is demanded upon my time. Personas takes up about 90% of my time, and running Jonny Lipsham Studios takes the rest of my time. But I mean, both are pretty much full-time jobs. And so, I do session work, but I kind of pick and choose what I'm involved with in terms of session work nowadays. Whereas I used to be a little bit of a, how do I put this? I used to be a bit of a session whore a little bit because I didn't have a lot of money, and so I needed to do a lot of session work to make a reasonable amount of money. And so I played on a lot of bad records, just simply because you have to, to make money. You have to play some bad records. And so I did. I played some bad records. And it is what it is. It's just, you have to make money somehow, and that's kind of the way you do it. So I played some radio jingles, I did some TV ads, I played on some very low budget films. I played, but however, doing the low budget films got me into the right circle for being associated with orchestras for bigger films, and so I have played on some higher budget films on their film scores. But sometimes playing some bad records can open up doors for playing on better records, as your reputation grows and people see the kind of quality of what you do. And that's certainly been true for me over the last 30 or so years, where, you know, you have to kind of start at the bottom and kind of work your way up, and you have to gain, you know, a reputation for being a professional and for having a good attitude and for being relentlessly positive, which is what I am. I am relentlessly positive. Even if I think, wow, this song sucks. Even if that's what I'm thinking inwardly and I'm going, man, this song is awful. And the people here really don't know what they're doing. I keep that's my inner dialogue. I keep that inside myself and I amuse myself with those thoughts. But outwardly, I'm relentlessly chipper and positive about the work and the people that I'm working with. Even when inwardly I'm going, wow, this song is utterly abysmal. And the lead singer couldn't hold a note if she tried. And the guitars are out of tune. The bass playing is all over the place. These songs have no form and structure. They don't make sense. I'm not hired to bring that kind of information. I'm not hired to bring that kind of opinion. I'm there to play a drum track, or I'm there to play bass, or I'm there to play a piano part and get the heck out of there as soon as I'm done. And I'm there, I'm a professional doing a professional job. My opinion of the song is irrelevant. I just play my heart out, and that's what I do. And people hear about that. People, you know, they'll say, hey, that Jonny Lipsham guy, you know, he comes and he plays his guts out and he sounds great. And he rescued our shit little song. I have done that. I've put in a performance that totally rescued a song. I've done that on a few occasions. And so my reputation spreads and I get hired by, you know, higher profile producers and so on and so forth. So all of that to say, yeah, monthly session work would be great if I had a regular monthly income guaranteed, where I would get, you know, £2,000 a month, guaranteed 12 months a year. Yeah, that would be cool. It really would be cool. But, you know, it doesn't really work like that, generally speaking. I know that there are some organizations that are kind of trying to do that kind of thing, and I'm interested. I'm keeping an eye on them. Diego asks, at what sample rate do you record? Do you hear the differences between MP3, 320, and FLAC files? That's a good couple of questions. I tend to do everything at 44.1. 32-bit float. Although now with Studio One 5, I can do 64-bit float, which is great. I can record and I can export at 64-bit float. It's great. It's good to be able to have that extra headroom, for sure. But yeah, I hear the difference between an MP3 at 320 and a FLAC file? Absolutely, I do. Because MP3 is a lossy compression format. So you can hear the low end and the top end being chopped off. Even at 320, I can hear it. But, you know, for the most part, most average, ordinary listeners, your end consumers, are not going to hear the difference. They really are not. Which is why when I export my music, my songs, my records, when I put them up on Bandcamp, which is where I put all of my music these days, they're all up there, available either as 44.1 WAVs or as 320 MP3s. Because most people are not going to be able to hear the difference. I would say a good 99% 99.3% of the population of the world are not going to hear the difference. It's only going to be audio engineers and audiophiles that are going to hear the difference. The rest of the people are not. They're not interested in that. So their ears are not going to be listening for the difference in fidelity. They're going to be listening to the music. They're going to be listening to what the song is telling them. They're going to be, they're going to be listening to the language. They're going to get caught up in the story of the song. They're going to get caught up in the melodies. They're going to get caught up in the harmonies. Those are the things that they listen to. The end user doesn't listen for fidelity. They don't listen to those kind of subtleties like we do, because our ears are trained to do it. Theirs aren't, so they're not going to hear it. Some people might have slightly more sensitive ears than anybody else, just naturally. But for the most part, most people are not going to hear differences in fidelity between a FLAC file, a WAV file, and an MP3 at 320 kilobits a second. They're not going to hear it. So, there are people that say, oh, you must record at 196 kilohertz. Why? You only need to do that at, if you're involved, in my opinion, with recording Foley or certain sound design situations. But if you're recording music to be listened to and consumed by listeners who may have Apple earbuds, they may have crappy little Sony headphones, they may be listening just on their mono speaker on their phone, or they may be listening on a stereo that's in the kitchen whilst they're sitting in the lounge reading a book. They're not going to hear those differences. They're really not. So I don't see the point at recording at exceptionally high sample rates. Because all you're going to do is create files that are gigantic in size. And you're going to push your CPU and your RAM to the max. And that's just going to end in one thing and one thing only, and that's frustration. So there really isn't any point. If you're on consumer grade gear, there's no point in recording or exporting your music at anything over 48K. And that's just my opinion. You may have differing opinions, and that's great. I'm totally open to all of your opinions. But really, in a home studio on consumer grade gear, there's literally no reason to record anything over 48K. Unless you are involved in producing sound design for Foley or for, other aspects of the audio industry. And you're not actually dealing with music production. Lily May is here. Hello, Lily. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Glad you are here. Anyway, enough of my ranting about sample rates. Because I can get totally on my high horse about that. David Anthony says, it depends on what you're listening on. There's not much true hi-fi these days. Yes, exactly. What we call hi-fi, as in high fidelity, is really nothing much above 48K at the most. Most commercial grade stereos, most commercial grade devices for playing music really don't deal with anything over 48K, I would say. But that's just my opinion. Some say it's to future-proof your music, says John. Yeah, I don't necessarily 100% see that. I'll be honest. And I'll tell you why. Here we are in the second decade of the 21st century, and vinyl has made a thorough comeback. There you go. We all thought vinyl would die a death when the CD came out. And certainly we thought we had nailed the final nail in the coffin of vinyl when MP3 came out. And now we have, places like Reverb Nation and Bandcamp and Nimbit, although Nimbit is going bye-bye, and, other platforms like that where you can put your music up online and you can consume music online. Absolutely, that should have put vinyl in the ground. And the last post being played by the bugler. It really should have, but it didn't. Because people still love the sound of vinyl, and they love the sound of analog. It may well be strange to some of you, but it is true. And it's not a bad thing. So what it means is, for as much as we make all of these technological advances to digitize things so that they don't decay and they don't degrade, there is still a massive market for producing music that is going to go onto an analog medium. And I believe that as we go forward through the 21st century, that there will always be that, whatever the future mediums are that put, the nail in the coffin of MP3 or the nail in the coffin for Bandcamp and other online services. Whatever that future technology is, these things will always still be around. They will always still exist in the same way that vinyl and analog tape are still around today. Even though they ostensibly probably shouldn't be. But they are. So, I'm not 100% sure I buy the future-proofing argument. I my first few records were done entirely analog. They were done entirely on tape machines. And then I gradually started introducing digital aspects into my my studio and into my recording techniques. And now everything for me is 100% in the box. I don't employ any tape machines anymore. Mostly because they're an absolute pain in the butt to maintain. But everything for me is done inside the box. So it is 100% digital for me now. But that's not to say I'm not going to do a version of my music that can be, cut to vinyl. It's not a bad idea. It's still at the moment expensive, even with the modern techniques and the modern technologies for vinyl production. It's still a little bit expensive, but it's definitely making a comeback. People are doing it. You can still go into record stores and buy vinyls. It's great. I love it. I have old vinyls. I have vinyls going back to, they're not really vinyls. They're more kind of acetates going back to the 1930s and the 1940s. These are extremely rare records that I have in my collection. I have, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie on a 1946 vinyl. It's an acetate print. And one of these days, I'm going to have to somehow transfer that into Studio One and digitize it because, it's an extremely ancient piece of material and it's going to degrade if I'm not careful. So there is that. David Anstey says there are harmonics above and below what digital records. We may not be able to hear them, but they still make a difference. That is true. That is true. But as I say, most people, the vast majority of your end consumer are not listening for that. They just aren't. If you do a survey of 1,000 people who listen to and enjoy music, and you were to ask them about such harmonics, they would look at you funny and say, what the heck are you talking about? They don't care about such things. All they care about is, does the song sound good? Does it impact me emotionally? Do I end up singing the hook or the chorus of the song? Do I know all the words after the first couple of listen-throughs? That's all they care about. They don't care about, upper harmonics. And they don't care about the harmonic series. And they don't care about saturation. And they don't care about bit crushing. And they don't care about all of these things that we do. They don't care about sample rates up at 196K. They don't. It's only us, audiophiles and tech geeks. We care about such things, and our ears are attuned to hearing those things because we have trained them to. But your end consumer doesn't care about such things. All they care about is being able to, for the most part, listen passively to your music. Because that's how most people listen to music. If they're not in a dance hall somewhere, at a nightclub, which they won't be at the moment because of COVID-19, but even if they're at home having their own personal little rave at home, they're not really actively listening to your music. They are listening to it passively. And they're catching the emotion of your music. If it makes them feel good, great. That's all they're interested in. They're not interested in everything else. So in that regard, from that point of view, who cares what medium you put your music out in? I mean, most people will, if you were to put your record out at 128K or below for an MP3, yeah, they'll hear that. And they'll go, hey, that sounds like that record was performed through a dishwasher. They'll hear that, but they won't really hear much else. And they'll know that it sounds bad. They wouldn't be able to tell you why, but they would know that it sounds bad. But if you were to play them a mix of your song at 48K, then a mix, the same mix at 96, the same mix at 196, they wouldn't be able to tell you the difference, mate. They really wouldn't. So that is my personal opinion on the whole sample rate thing and upper harmonics and all of that. It's great to be aware of them. It's great to know about them and what they do and how they affect sound and how they affect the quality of your music, for sure. Are they essential? No. Anyway, with that, we have overrun. And I need to get to bed because I have an early start in the morning. It is already 1:15 in the morning here in Edinburgh. So I will see you folks on Wednesday over on the Home Studio Trainer YouTube channel for Songwriting Simplified with Jonny Guy. But other than that, all I have to do is say good night. Good night.